This is one of a series of Good Answers presentations, offering evidence to answer skeptical challenges to the Bible's accuracy. Recently, I was talking with an acquaintance, an obviously intelligent professional. When the subject of the Bible came up, I mentioned my belief that its historical elements were trustworthy. He offered a gentle disagreement. After all, he said, the passage of so many years between the events the Bible describes and the time they were written down almost guaranteed that omission, exaggeration, and simple error would creep in. I replied that archaeology and ancient non-biblical records have often shown the Bible's accounts to be accurate, and that there was evidence that those accounts could have been written down very soon after the events they describe. And so, today, we will look at two related questions. How early was Israel in Canaan? And were people like Joshua able to record what they did? Of course, we must note the consensus, or near consensus, of historians. Here's a representative statement. Most scholars agree that ancient Israel first appeared in the highlands of Canaan in about 1200 BCE. So said the editors of Biblical Archaeology Review in a summary of scholarly articles that touch on the topic. If we begin with that judgment, then we can have a ballpark estimate of the date of the Exodus. Here's what the Oxford Bible Commentary has to say about it. Quote, the date of the event is most often put at the end of the Bronze Age in the 13th century BCE. End quote. And most sources will give you a more precise date, 1225 BC. Why that date? There are several reasons, as it happens. First, there is William Foxwell Albright, perhaps the most highly regarded American archaeologist of the last century. His reasons? Well, he argued that there are no physical traces of the Exodus in Egypt, so we must look elsewhere. The destruction of Jericho, the first major victory of the Jews as they entered the Promised Land, he placed at around 1200 BC. And then there was the biblical statement that, as slaves in Egypt, the Jews had built a city called Ramesses, and the most powerful Egyptian pharaoh was Ramesses II. 1225 fit the time of his reign. Several pharaohs had that title, but we need not dig into that here. Anyway, Albright's influence was so great that his 1225 date was taken as authoritative. So, when Cecil B. DeMille made his epic film, he pitted Charlton Heston's Moses against Yul Brynner as, who else? Ramesses II, and 1225 became canonical. And though the Bible indicates a date of 1446 BC, the skeptical climate among modern scholars was happy to dismiss what the Bible had said. Now, that acquaintance I mentioned would likely say to all of this, what does it matter? You're just talking about some date in ancient history anyway. But to a believer, it matters, all right. Don't forget the domino effect. If Israel was not in Canaan until about 1200, then the Exodus would have been in the mid-1200s. And then the Bible's date of 1446 was wrong. And then we can't trust the Bible's historical accounts. And finally, There goes our confidence in the Bible as God's Word. The dates matter. That's why I will argue that the Israelites were in Canaan earlier than most scholars say, and that the Exodus was some 200 years earlier than 1225. I have 6 reasons for that view: the destruction of Jericho, the lead cursing tablet from Mount Ebal, the Merneptah stele, the Borchot inscription, and the Soleb inscription. My 6th reason is the Bible, and with its date of 1446 BC, the other 5 will concur. Albright had an opinion about Jericho. Let's begin there. Several archaeologists have dug there, but 3 will concern us here: John Garstang, Kathleen Kenyon, and Bryant Wood. Garstang dug for some 10 seasons in the 1930s and concluded that Jericho was destroyed, much as the Bible says, about 1400 BC. But Dame Kathleen Kenyon, Britain's most renowned archaeologist, drew on her findings from the 1950s that there was no datable pottery after 1550 BC, proving that the city was destroyed 150 years before Joshua and was uninhabited for centuries afterward. That view was generally accepted until about 1990, when Bryant Wood restudied all the evidence. Kenyon had based her claim that Jericho was abandoned after 1550 on the absence of any datable pottery for centuries after that. But Bryant Wood found that she had overlooked the presence of Cypriot bichrome pottery, which is dated to the 1400s. And in fact, Garstang had actually found and published that pottery evidence before Kenyon. This, along with other evidence, showed that Kenyon's date was wrong. Wood wrote, quote, "Had she been aware of Garstang's finds, the debate over the date of Jericho's fall could have taken a very different course. Why Kenyon did not study Garstang's finds more closely remains a mystery." End quote. With this key evidence, one can say confidently, Jericho was destroyed early in the late Bronze Age in about 1400 BCE. And so, necessarily, Israel and Joshua were in Canaan by that early date. Here's the second reason for Israel's early presence in Canaan: the Ebal tablet. It begins with Adam Zertal, an Israeli archaeologist who excavated at Mount Ebal in the 1980s. This is the mountain devoted to curses for disobedience when Israel renewed the covenant after entering Canaan. Zertal found an altar there, which he dated to about 1250 BC, and a second one under it that would have been from around 1400. Since he accepted a 1225 date for the Exodus, he assumed that the 1250 altar would be from Joshua's time. But then came Scott Stripling, re-examining the debris from the site some 30 years later. He used wet sifting, which allows one to identify small items overlooked in the initial dig. Among the finds was a lead curse tablet. These were common in antiquity, when an aggrieved person would write a curse against an enemy and then bury the tablet to prevent the cursed person from finding it and undoing the curse. After painstaking study with high-tech scanning, Stripling's team were able to read the hidden text, finding it to be in Proto-alphabetic Hebrew. This ancient form of the language was previously known only from some inscriptions in the Sinai Peninsula. In a bombshell press conference in 2022, they announced what it said. Cursed, cursed, cursed. Cursed by the God Yahweh. You will die cursed. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed by Yahweh. Cursed, cursed, cursed. This little lead tablet has the power to rewrite much of what historians have said and written about ancient Israel. For example, the text was composed in chiasmus. Remember that literary technique? Jesus used it in saying, "Many who are first shall be last, and the last shall be first." The pair is reversed when it's repeated. A, B, B, A. Shakespeare often did it as well, as he does in Hamlet. Suit the action to the word to the action. A, B, B, A. It makes a statement memorable, and it has been used by skilled speakers and writers for over 2,000 years. Now, note the curse. Seen in 4 lines, we have A, B, B, A. And there's more. Look at just the first and last lines. Here is A, B, B, A once more. A, cursed, cursed, cursed. B, cursed by the God Yahweh. And even more. Look at lines 2 and 3. You will die cursed. Cursed you will surely die. Another chiasmus inside the larger ones. In this small inscription, we have a triple chiasmus, done with amazing economy, only 40 pro-alphabetic letters. Even a skilled author today would not want to try to duplicate that. It was no semi-literate peasant who wrote this. So one of the translation team could say about the writer, quote, "Believe me, he could write any chapter in the Bible. This is why no one can claim that the Bible was written in a later period." End quote. That's Dr. Gershon Galil, University of Haifa, at the press conference on March 24th, 2022. So here is our second reason for an earlier Israeli presence in Canaan. We have several pieces of evidence from around 1400 BC. There are altars and curses on the biblical Mount of Cursing. There is written Hebrew, some 400 years before most scholars believed it was possible. There is a writer capable of doing highly sophisticated literary composition, and the writer is a worshiper of the God of Israel. All in all, this lead tablet gives us pious, literate Israelis in Canaan about 1400 BC. Now for the third reason, the Merneptah stele. It was found by the intrepid Flinders Petrie among the monuments of Thebes in 1896. It's a record of the accomplishments of the pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned from 1213 to 1203 BC. The last lines of the great stele record his military campaign in Canaan. Here's what he says, quote, "Canaan has been plundered into every sort of woe. Ashkelon has been overcome. Gezer has been captured. Yanoam was made non-existent. Israel is laid waste. His seed is not." With allowance for Pharaoh's habit of exaggeration, that reference to Israel is major evidence. And when they were important enough to merit a Pharaoh's boast about them, Herschel Shanks tells us, the hieroglyphic inscription can be dated quite precisely to somewhere between 1210 and 1205 BCE. But there is more to this third reason than just the stele. That military incursion into Canaan is actually recorded in two places, on the stele I've just been discussing, and on the wall of the great temple of Karnak, directly across the Nile. A comparison of the two, first done by Dr. Frank Yurko, fleshes out our information, since one is done in hieroglyphic text, and the other is primarily done in sculptural relief on a temple wall, showing each of the battles. Now, it's important to know that in hieroglyphics there are some symbols that are not pronounced as part of the words. They designate what kind of object the word refers to. For example, on the stele, the word Ashkelon is accompanied by a symbol that marks it as a city, typically a fortified one. And on the Karnak inscription, the battle scene does show part of Ashkelon's fortification wall. Next on the stele is Gezer, also designated as a fortified town. And at Karnak, though the name of the town is missing, the scene again includes part of its fortification. Then comes Yanoam, marked as a fortified city on the stele, and on the wall of Karnak is a victory scene with the city's name, again missing, but some of its fortification is reproduced here. And finally, the fourth victory on the stele is over Israel. The determiner with that word, though, designates not a fortified town, but a people group, a nation. And so, on the wall of Karnak, the battle scene occurs in open country, not before a town wall. Dr. Yurko has demonstrated that the stele and the Karnak inscription both record Merneptah's Canaan campaign, with the 4 victories he shows in the same order. And though the name of Israel has been lost on the Karnak inscription, the correspondence is exact. Here is that 4th sculptural relief from the Temple of Karnak. And here is Dr. Yurko's concluding statement about its significance. Quote, "Unlike the other 3 battle reliefs on the Karnak wall, this scene contains no city. Instead, the battle takes place in the open, in a somewhat hilly countryside, a setting that fits the non-urbanized Israelite tribes of the time." The third reason for Israel's early presence in Canaan has several parts, but here is what we have seen. First, Israel is named on the Merneptah stele as a people, not a city-state. The Karnak relief, therefore, shows Merneptah's victory over them taking place in open country and not under the walls of a town. Next, we note that the Pharaoh's success against Israel is treated as an important one. These are not some scruffy nomads to be trampled and not worthy even of mention in the campaign. and most revealing for our purposes here, Merneptah's incursion into Canaan took place in 1210 BC. This people group, called Israel, were well enough established there for the Pharaoh to make them one of his 4 goals in the war. They must have been around for some time before he invaded. Now, I said there was a 4th reason to believe Israel was in Canaan earlier than what scholars so often say. That's the Borchardt inscription. It is a granite slab first acquired by Ludwig Borchardt in Israel in 1913. Like the Merneptah stele, it records a victory in Canaan, but, as we shall see, earlier than that stele. Several prisoners from the campaign are pictured, with the name of each enemy shown in a so-called name ring. The prisoners are all West Semitic, as we expect from Canaan. Experts point out that they have shoulder-length hair, they wear headbands, and they have pointed beards. This is the way that the Egyptians portrayed West Semitic people, and the name rings confirm this. They are Ashkelon, Canaan, and probably Israel. The hieroglyphics for the 3rd name are damaged, but it is almost certainly Israel. 3 scholars have stated that, quote, the geographical proximity of the proposed name Israel to Ashkelon and Canaan makes the identification with Israel likely. They go on to say, in fact, that there is no other known toponym, that is, place or people name, from that region that it could be only Israel. There are also some interesting parallels here. Remember that the Merneptah stele and its counterpart relief on the wall of the Karnak temple had these defeated enemies on it: Ashkelon, Gezer, Yanoam, and Israel. Examining the Borchardt inscription, we found Ashkelon, Canaan, and Israel, and in that order. The 2 victorious campaigns were obviously similar, though they were almost 200 years apart. 200 years? Yes. Raphael Gevion, the noted Israeli Egyptologist, dates the Borchardt inscription to 1400 BC. And there they are together, Ashkelon, Canaan, and Israel, on an inscription some 200 years earlier than any other that is known. That's back to the time of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III. He, too, had encountered Israel in Canaan. Now for reason number 5. That is the Soleb inscription, found on a temple to the Egyptian god Amun-Ra, far up the Nile on its west bank in ancient Nubia. That's Sudan today. The temple was not excavated until the 1950s and 60s by Michele Giorgini. It was built on order of that same Amenhotep III, who reigned in the late 15th or early 14th century BC. The massive columns in its hypostyle hall are inscribed with lists of the pharaoh's enemies and his supposed victories. I say supposed victories because the pharaohs were notorious for exaggerating or even fabricating claims of their victories over foreign enemies. Amenhotep's lists are probably not accurate then, since we know that he conducted only one minor campaign in his entire reign. But the enemies themselves would be real why claim to have defeated nations that everyone knew didn't exist? Most of the columns have fallen, but on one column drum there is an unique inscription. Though all of the inscriptions name significant enemies, this one is especially so. The inscription's easy enough to decipher so that a reconstruction can be shown, as here. The overall pattern of these inscriptions is to show the defeated enemy with his city or nation recorded in hieroglyphic within a name ring, as we saw in the Borchardt inscription. There we saw enemies located with city names like Ashkelon or Gezer. But this one record includes no geographical location at all. Instead, the people are identified only by their god. The inscription reads, Shasu, that is, nomads, of Yahweh. It's no challenge to identify these people. Amenhotep could not say where they dwelt, and so he identified them by the most significant thing about them, their devotion to their god. And of course he could not give a location, because in the latter 1400s they were indeed nomads, wandering in the Sinai desert. The scholars make this clear. Quote, since the only ancient people known to have worshipped a deity named Yahweh in ancient times were the Hebrews or Israelites, it also logically follows that these particular Shasu nomads associated with Yahweh could be identified with the early Israelites before they became a sedentary population in Canaan, and that the Egyptians had familiarity with this group and this deity during the 18th dynasty and the end of the 15th century BCE. End quote. This may be the oldest inscription known that names Israel's God, Yahweh, and it tells us that Israel existed as a people, worshiping Yahweh, while still wandering the Sinai under Moses' leadership. And Amenhotep III knew them as an enemy. Well, there is one more reason to consider, perhaps the best of all. What does the Bible contribute to our search for answers here? Well, it provides us with two major clues for the date when we match it up with archaeology. Here's the first from Numbers. The spies sent in to survey the promised land returned and said it was great country. Quote, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. Numbers 13:28. And here is what scholars tell us about that time. Canaanite towns were heavily fortified at the end of the Middle Bronze Age, but not at the end of the Late Bronze Age, around 1200 BC. Yohanan Aharoni, Aaron Burke, and Rivka Gonen, among others, agree on this. Catch the connection? The end of the Middle Bronze Age is about 1400 BC, and the Canaanite towns then were heavily fortified. 200 years later, they were not. So, when the Bible tells us that the Israelites faced fortified towns, they were spot on. That's how they were in 1400, but not later. The Bible's record gives us another clue to the dating. It tells us that in the conquest of Canaan, Israel burned 3 and only 3 cities, Jericho, Ai, and Hatzor. As for Jericho, and they burned the city with fire and everything in it. Joshua 6:24. This happened in 1406 BC, as we saw earlier. Then came Ai. So Joshua burned Ai and made it forever a heap of ruins, as it is to this day. Joshua 8:28. And the dig director from Ai tells us, from 1995 to 2000, I had the pleasure of directing an excavation at Khirbet El Makater, just 1 kilometer west of Et Tel, which does meet all the requirements to be Joshua's Ai. We found a small border fortress dating to the 15th century that had been destroyed by fire. And then Hatzor. And he, Joshua, burned Hatzor with fire. Joshua 11:11. And now from archaeology. Evidence was found in both the upper and lower cities that the site was destroyed by fire in the 15th century. So, for these biblical passages, the Bible gives no specific dates, though they are implied from the broader context, and archaeology has confirmed them for the 1400s. Cities fortified then, but not later, and 3 cities, and only 3, burned then as well. But of course, the Bible does give us an exact date for the Exodus in 2 places. Here's one, quote, in the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he began to build the house of the Lord. 1 Kings 6:1. Well, there is quite good agreement among scholars as to the dates of Solomon's reign. Most tell us it began in 970 BC, and so his 4th year would be 966, and 480 years prior to that would be 1446 BC. Following their departure from Egypt, the people were 40 years in the Sinai wilderness, so their entry into Canaan would have been in about 1400 BC. Isn't it nice when all the important evidence points in the same direction? That's what we have here. How early was Israel in Canaan? Most scholars say maybe 1200. But if we are thinking 200 years earlier, around 1400, well, there's Jericho, the Ebal tablet, the Merneptah stele, the Borchert inscription, the Soleb inscription, and, oh yes, the Bible. If you have questions about this lecture, or any of the others in the Good Answers series, you may address them to me, Dr. Jerry C. Four, at yahoo.com.